Leave your pain here and go out and do your magnificent things. Some of you might remember that I said that during the People versus Larry Nassar, when the sister survivors stood in front of me and faced their biggest fear, their predator. He had assaulted young girls and women for over 30 years. I allowed 169 victims to speak, 156 I dubbed sister survivors. If one person would not have feared the truth, would not have feared perhaps not going to the Olympics, would not have feared knocking off the revered doctor 30 years ago, that case would not have been mine. Now, I've always let victims speak because I think it's important for their healing. It's also important for me as a judge to know the backstory. And people have asked me, how is it you knew that? And how is it you knew to ask, what would you like me to know? So in order to answer that question, and maybe to help you understand what's gone on or hasn't gone on in your life, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my backstory. And as I do, I want you to think about your own backstory and ask yourself, what am I afraid of? Has my fear held me back from achieving my goals? Have I achieved all the goals that I have? Am I who I want to be? If fear is holding you back, then it is controlling you. You need to control your fears. We all need to control our fears so that we have the opportunity to succeed in our lives. For me, as a very young child, I was born to a German mother and a Maltese father. My brother came along 11 months and 2 days later, and my father was in medical school. He could not study with 2 crying babies, so my mother and my brother and I got on a plane, and we went to live with my grandparents in Detroit, Michigan. My grandparents had emigrated from Malta a few years earlier. Now, Nunnu and Nunna in Maltese means grandfather and grandmother. So we went to live with Nunnu and Nunna. My uncles called them Ma and Pa. My mother worked in an insurance company in the evenings, so my brother and I were primarily raised by Nunnu and Nunna. In my mind, Nunnu and Nunna meant Ma and Pa. They took care of our daily needs. When my mother came home, we ran to her because we'd been naughty, and she was like our older sister who would save us. Now, my father, we would see him about once a year, like Santa Claus. He'd bring a gift, we'd have a nice time, and he'd leave. I didn't know he was my dad. When he finished medical school, there was a car parked outside. All our belongings were suddenly in it. My brother and I were put into it. And my father and my mother drove us to our new home, about 100 miles away. They didn't listen to me when I said, why are we going? What is happening? I thought I was being kidnapped from my parents, Nunnu and Nunna. And when I asked for an explanation, they just thought I was a stupid child, and of course I knew who my parents were. And I tell you, to this day, I have 2 sets of parents. My first parents are Nunnu and Nunna, and my second set are my biological parents, and I love them all. But I would have understood had I been told the right information. And so I learned fear, real fear. We all are born with some fears. And then the rest are learned from our life experiences. And some save you. The fear of not walking down a dark alley, not accepting a ride with someone, the fear of a noise, might be a stranger we should avoid. And those are good fears. So some of our fears are really, really good. But then there are those that are pent up inside us, like my feeling of being kidnapped. So what did I do? I rebelled. I would not eat my mother's food. And my punishment was to sit there for hours until it was time to go to bed, and the food got very cold, and I was finally shoved off to bed. And I didn't do my chores on time. I wasn't always respectful. So if you asked me when I was a child where I traveled, I'd say the corner. I spent hours in the corner because I had been naughty. My father expected me to apologize for certain things, and I refused. I stood mute. And he'd say you're sorry, and I'd look at him. One day he got so frustrated, he grabbed all the Monopoly money out of our game. And he said, say you're sorry, and I stood silent, and he gave me $1, and he did that 365 times. And then he said to me, you now have 365 days, 1 year of no television. You'll get $1 back every day, and at the end you can watch television again, but you'll learn to say you're sorry. Now the funny thing was, that did not break me like they thought. It made me stronger. I worked through the fear. I didn't care what they did to me. What else could they do to me? They've kidnapped me. They've taken me from the people I loved most in the world, who I thought were my parents. So every single thing they put in front of me, I said, no, not doing it, not happening. I was not broken. I worked past my fear and my anger so that I would succeed in what I wanted. I would get what I needed, no matter how long it took. And that was born inside me and lives there today, much to the dismay of my parents. Now, when it came time for college, my father, being the doctor, and he was a great, well-known doctor, wanted me to be a doctor. I promise you, no one wants me to be a doctor, nor a veterinarian. I am not good at math or science. I did not want to be a doctor. It was not my passion. I wanted to be a writer. And so when my father said, what are you going to go to college for? And I said, I'm going to be a writer. I might as well have said, I'm going to go star in a Hollywood film, because he was very upset. And after many conversations, we were in the foyer in our home. And I was tired of the argument because I was not going to medical school. And he said, you've got to go to medical school. And I looked him in the eye, and he looked me in the eye, and it was a tug of war, emotional tug of war. And I said, I'm not going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a lawyer. And I did that because doctors overwhelmingly hate lawyers. And then I said in my head, I'm not just going to be a lawyer, I'm going to be a judge. And I did that. I also have published novels. I never let go of my dreams. When I graduated from college and then went to law school, I was looking for a job, and I went over and interviewed with a state senator. And I thought, this is a great job. I know how laws are implemented. I do not know how they are made. And I did really well in the interview. 3 weeks went by, and now I'm getting other really good job offers. But that was the one I wanted. So I picked up the phone, and I made an appointment to see the senator again. And everyone around me said, how could you think about calling a senator? And I said, what have I got to lose? Either I have the job or I don't. I do not like limbo. I am going to control this. Fear of calling a senator? That will not stop me. I will not listen to you naysayers. So I made the appointment. I kept the appointment. And he said, what did you want to meet with me about? And I said, I think this job is mine. I will do a good job. I'm getting other job offers. You need to decide if I'm hired or not. He looked at me and said, you are hired. You start Monday. When I went to the job Monday, and I walked into his office and I said, okay, why did you make me wait 3 weeks? I knew this was my job, and so did you. And he said, because you are a woman, and you will primarily be working with men. And when you called me, I knew that you would have the guts to do what is needed in this job, to stand up to the male lobbyists, to stand up to the male legislators, to do the job for me and represent the county well and represent my office well. And I know you'll never disappoint me. I worked for him for almost 10 years. The next thing I wanted to do was to join the military. And the military did not want me. I did the paperwork, I passed all the tests, I did everything I was supposed to do, and my application sat collecting dust on a colonel's desk for 1.5 years. So I thought, okay, I can fight the military too. So I decided to volunteer. And I put on my tightest jeans, a reasonable shirt, and I volunteered. And I made sure that when I got coffee, it was where the general had his coffee too. And by the time I got upstairs back to the JAG office, he was calling the colonel and said, "What is that woman doing here?" And the colonel said, "Well, she's done the paperwork, she's just volunteering." And the general said, "Get that woman in a uniform." The very next weekend, I was sworn in. The general crossed out 6 years, put 8 years of service in the contract. I said, "Sir, put 20, I will stay in," and I did. You see, fear cannot hold you back. Fear controls you. You turn over your life to fear if you do not take action. You need to turn pain into power and fear into success. And don't be afraid of failure. You need to turn failure into opportunity, because failure is the teachable moments in our life. And when you fail, you learn a lesson, and then you take the next step and the next step. And you know what? Pretty soon you succeed, and people say, "How did you do that?" That is the power in fear. You either get stuck in it or you use it. And I like to use fear. I will not be held down. And that's what you saw with the sister survivors as they testified. They took their fear and they faced their predator, their biggest fear ever. And they looked him in the eyes, and they came up, and they were very small and shy. And they would come and they said, "Judge, can I talk to him?" And I said, "Yes, absolutely." And they turned and they faced him and they said, "You hurt me, and I am not a number, and I am not going to stand for this. I am a name. And you look at me, and you listen to what you did to me." And they took their pain, made it into power, and it wasn't just for them, it was for everybody watching them. And initially, there were only about 8 who were going to testify. And then it turned to 20, and then 80, and 156 testified. Because power is contagious. Being fearless is contagious. You just have to face it in the eyes and say, "I can walk past you. I've got a life, and I'm going to live my life. You will not take hold of my life." That is the magic of fear. You all have it in you. Look at your backstory. Be fearless. Live the life you are supposed to live. Walk through that door of fear and make it the biggest opportunity, and then do the next one and the next one, and you will go higher and farther than you ever thought possible. So I want you to partner with me in that, and I want you to leave your fear here and go out and do your magnificent things. And I just want another couple seconds of your time. And I'm going to ask you now, I know you've been sitting for a while, I want your arms. I want you to put them in the air, and I want you to do what I do, and I want the cheerleader voices. I want the voice that you use when your team is winning. And I want you to join me in the loudest voice you have. All right, let's go. I have a voice.
I have a voice.
I am victorious. Warrior. I matter. I am powerful. I am fearless. pass it on. Thank you.